We're live. Hey, folks. This is Zach Osterman, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. He is Mike Niziolek, Bloomington Herald-Times. It is Mike. I don't know if you've been outside today. It is a gorgeous, maybe we call it pre-spring day down here in Bloomington at least. Breezy, just the right amount of cloud cover, 73 degrees last time I was outside. It is very much, let's be honest, not podcasting weather. Maybe we should be doing this out on a patio somewhere. But hopefully wherever you are listening, you are enjoying the weather. I think we've all earned it after what I believe I saw was the coldest winter in maybe 12 years, 14 years. We don't need to talk about that anymore.
We do need to find your forecasts.
I was going to say we don't need to talk about that anymore. We do need to talk about Indiana basketball on the bubble. I said Bubble Battle in C-Bus was the name of this this podcast. We will obviously both be at Ohio State, Indiana tomorrow at Value City Arena in Columbus in a game that I think it is fair to say is not a lose and go home for Indiana in a in the absolute sense, but is probably a lose and go home for Indiana insofar as what we can reasonably expect this team to do in Chicago next week. They really, really need this one on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, anybody doesn't. When you're in the conference tournament, it's never a lose and go home. Since if you win the conference tournament, you can advance. But to your point, if they lose this one to a bubble team that is basically very similar to their resume, similar resumes, it would take probably 3 wins in Chicago to sort of get to Dayton, I think, if they lost to Ohio State, because
that's probably a best case in terms of bid thieves and maybe some other bubble teams falling away too. That's not just, well, if they do that, they'll be fine. That's
right. Yeah. No, that's that then they'll be in the picture. I think it'll be a very tough road. I think they're basically locked into the 10 seed. Most likely would get the winner of Northwestern, Penn State. And then I think it's that UCLA track. I don't know if UCLA can move or not, but and it just from what we've seen of this team the last couple of weeks, it's just you don't have a lot of faith that they'll be able to put together a run like that once they hit the teams that have given them problems all year. UCLA, they did win, but that one would, obviously double overtime game that they almost gave away. Northwestern's probably not even a given because Nick Martinelli came in to Assembly Hall and ate them up. And it's they against the bottom of the Big Ten, they were better than Minnesota by quite a wide margin on, what was it, Wednesday? I don't know when they played. But that was a Minnesota team that was completely depleted. They played 5 players, really. 6 played less than 10 minutes. So it's I don't know, they haven't beat a real team in a while.
Yeah, listen, to your point, and this is one of the weaknesses, and I wrote something kind of piggybacking off of my mock selection experience last month that went live this morning, just sort of talking about the case for Indiana, the case against Indiana, recognizing that if you're on the bubble, there is a case for you. That's the first thing to say. If you're on the bubble, I know everyone is very fatalistic if their team's on the bubble about their chances this time of year, right? That's just the nature of it because you're looking at your resume from 5 feet and everyone's resume from 5,000 feet. If you're on the bubble, there's a case for you. And there is a case for Indiana, and we'll probably get into that. The case against Indiana is it's been a month since they beat a team that's likely to be in the NCAA tournament. And frankly, they've only beaten 3 teams all year that are likely to be in the NCAA tournament. They only have 2 quad 1 wins. Both of those, we're saying, are quad 1A. So they're good, like Washington at Washington would be a quad 1 win, but that's not the same thing as beating Purdue at home and UCLA on the road. But the resume based metrics don't love them lately because of that 4-game slide. The predictive metrics, Ken Pom, Torvik, BPI like them more. And we can get into the mock selection piece of it, which I think is fascinating. But, to your point, you just you need to make, I don't want to say you need to make statements because I don't think anybody in the committee room is going to suddenly perk up because Indiana beat Ohio State. But you need to be putting the right results on the board at this time of year. You need to be separating yourself at a time when, if things go according to your own plan, bubble teams around you are maybe losing early in their conference tournament or are suffering bad losses or what have you. Indiana just needs, frankly, quantity as much as anything right now. And
I would say, if you were betting or saying the odds are better, I would say the odds are better of them being one and done than winning 3 straight in the tournament.
Well, so I looked this up. I went to Bart Torvik, which is Torvik's one of the predictive metrics, which do on average like Indiana more. And what I did was I basically he's got a function in there. It's called TeamCast, and you can sort of select results, and you can even add a conference tournament simulation. And then he'll give you kind of the statistical likelihood, the statistical change in different things. Now, it's worth saying Torvik's rankings like Indiana more than the average. Like Indiana moved back into the top 30 in Torvik. They're not in the top 30 in the net, in WAB, in KenPom, any of that. But I believe they're 28th at the moment in Bart's rankings as of 1:41 p.m. on Friday, March 6th. But I gave him a loss to Ohio State, and then like a pretty boilerplate Big Ten tournament, a win against Oregon, and a loss to UCLA. So kind of a nothing meaningful happens in Chicago kind of tournament. With the loss to Ohio State and that conference tournament run, they were one of the last 4 teams in the field. And again, that should probably come with the caveat that Torvik's rankings like them a little bit more. But the point is they were right there on the cut line. When I gave them a win at Ohio State, they moved into the last 4 buys, out of the last 4 in, and the change in the likelihood, so to speak, percentage-wise, of Indiana getting an at-large bid was 10%. And I mean, for one win to count for 10%, a 10% change in your odds at this time of year is just really substantial. And again, I think to your point, it is hard to imagine this team losing on Saturday, but then having the capacity to do the things it would need to do in Chicago. If for no other reason than simply because Indiana's kind of been playing like a 6-7 man rotation now. And you would have to, like, if you play, let's say you have to play all the way to Saturday, well, that means you got to win 4 or 3 games in a row against more rested teams, because you're going to play a team on Thursday that won't have played yet, and you'll play a team on Friday that won't have played yet. It's just a lot easier to imagine Indiana getting in if they win on Saturday than it is if they don't.
Yeah, but I don't think the Ohio State's probably played better recently. I mean, they had kind of a swoon too. But they've sort of bounced back here of recent, and that that's and from my time on the beat, I mean, obviously much more limited than yours, but like that's been a weird game at Ohio State the last couple of years in terms of the 2 overtime games or 2 games that are decided at the buzzer, maybe what it was.
They've been tight games. They do have, I think, a 4 or 5 game win streak against Ohio State now. The last time they lost to Ohio State was Trace Jackson Davis's junior year, Mike Woodson's first year.
But they had to come back the one into overtime. Leo scored the one. So I mean, like they've been, it's been an interesting sort of those interesting trips down there. And Ohio State won 2 straight, beat Purdue. Penn State, we don't count that, but they did win against Purdue at home. And I think they've won, looks like 5 straight at home, going back to January, unless I'm missing a game. 4 straight. 4 straight. So they've won 4 straight at home. So yeah, I mean, at your point, like the rotations changed. Obviously now, essentially, Indiana's only playing off the bench Josiah Miles and Reed Bailey. Tatum Conaway and Trent Sisley have kind of made cameos mostly in recent games. And so, I just this team feels increasingly like it rises and falls on if Wilkerson can get his, and then one other guy can sort of step up. Sam Alexis was the guy against Minnesota and be that second scorer. Otherwise, it's not a team that has shot well as a team, kind of on target as a group in a while, and just doesn't have sort of those consistent options behind Wilkerson.
I think you need two, really. I mean, like the Michigan State game, for example, Tucker DeVries scores 20, and it's still never really in the balance. I think that to me, it's like it's a little bit you need just like a second score and a third score, and I think it's a little bit more. And this is coming to starker relief as Sam Alexis has kind of maybe found a little bit larger role in the last few weeks, but more the idea that it's also when it's Sam Alexis, there's balance, right? That like, it's like you can go back to that UCLA game, for example, and you can say, well, Wilkerson went nuts and, Nick Dorn went nuts. And I think Tucker DeVries had like 9, 10, and 7. So a really kind of like diverse impact in that game. But I think this team is better when it gets the balance between post scoring and forcing teams to be honest about how they defend the post, and then getting Wilkerson +1 going behind the arc, or just sort of like with the court spacing that Sam Alexis provides. And I think the +1 doesn't need to score 20. They just need somebody who is a legitimate sort of third option, right? Like they don't need the +1 to do everything Wilkerson does. They just need, if Wilkerson gets 25, and let's say you can get like 15 and 7 from your starting 5, they just need that other one to sort of, be, I mean, like to use a Purdue comparison, be like Fletcher Lawyer, just somebody that's going to give you 12 to 17 points. Maybe once in a while we'll go off for 20. I just like the inconsistency to me has been not being able to find sort of that third option unless it's Sam Alexis, because then that gives you a little bit of that gives you an offensive balance that I think this team has been starved for at times when it's struggled this year.
Yeah. And then Michigan State, I was looking at it, yes, Tucker, I mean, they got nothing from anybody else. Like, not just
right.
and I mean, guys weren't even shooting the ball. They got no points off the bench, only one field goal attempt off the bench. And then the rest of the team besides Tucker and Lamar was 5 of 19. So, I mean, like, there's no balance. I mean, they needed just a little bit of something from everybody else, more balance. I mean, to your point, whether it's a third scorer or just a little more balance with the rest of the team, I just think it hasn't been a guarantee that they've gotten the second guy recently, to get Tucker. Nick Dorn's obviously sort of hadn't had really a good game in a while. He was a little better against Minnesota, but like, again, I don't know how much credit you get for that. It's just it's a hard team to figure out on a night-to-night basis. And Lamar is like, I'm not taking anything away from him, but like some of these losses, he's gotten a lot of those points late where it's sort of not meant as much. Like, I just think.
Well, I think he's done that because teams have been able to, because nothing is loosening up the defense elsewhere.
They can focus on him.
They're focusing on him. They're keeping him quiet while they get control of the game. And then as, like when you get up 15, 17 points, you're trying to just kind of like manage a game through, right? It's late in the season. You're not trying to go 100 miles an hour all the way through the final horn. And so once like maybe things ease up a little bit and the game sort of settles into a little bit of a rhythm, then Wilkerson starts scoring, not because, he's suddenly playing harder or whatever, but simply because the team shifts its approach a little bit.
Right. Whereas they need him earlier. And Minnesota got
going.
Minnesota got 3 early.
To do that, right?
Yeah, Wilkerson got three pointers early against Minnesota. He needs to do that against the bigger teams, and like you said, obviously it's harder. The focus is on him. That taking him out of the game plan obviously kind of derails Indiana's chances right from the start. But without him without him doing that in the first half, doing what he did against Minnesota, where it opens up and it softens up a little bit, this team just doesn't really have a chance. Like and it's you just watch these games and they follow a very similar pattern. They can't match up against bigger, more physical teams. If they're not shooting well, you can probably pack it in. Basically, it's just not a team that can recover from that. And like you said, when you're in a compressed tournament with only a 7-man rotation, if that, it's just hard to envision them going 3 games in the Big Ten tournament, with one of them being, because I was doing some Nebraska and Michigan State are competing for the 2. If UCLA wins, I think they're locked into that 7. Otherwise, it could be a rematch against Ohio State, depending on what happens on Saturday. But I mean, if the path is Northwestern, UCLA, and Michigan State, I mean, they were not good against Michigan State this year. I mean, that game, I would not bet that give them much chance in that game. So, like, to your point, they got to beat Ohio State to sort of have a realistic shot here to even get to Dayton, because I think maybe that's the other thing we should talk about. Like, regardless, do you see them not going to Dayton?
We'll get there in a minute. I think to talk a little bit more about Ohio State specifically, before we dig into maybe the wider resume questions. I think when you sort of tie together that question of like a third scorer, a post presence, some post offense, I don't think it's unfair to say that the games where Indiana's really struggled to do that are the games where they have struggled for size, right? Like, so, Sam Alexis, he only has 8 points against Michigan State. He only has 5 points against Purdue, and that obviously that game was kind of a bad night for just about everyone. He only has 11 points against Illinois, which of course is a game where certainly Indiana was bound to lose the sort of the size battle, so to speak. Ohio State doesn't have a ton of size, and when you look at things like, like in conference play, they're pretty middle of the pack in opponent 2-point percentage. Their opponents score. Their opponents are 7th in Big Ten play in percentage of points scored off of 2-pointers, as opposed to 15th in percentage of points scored off 3-pointers. Now, Indiana is going to score more than that off 3-pointers because they're just going to take more. That's, it's not that Ohio State doesn't have bigs, but Ohio State doesn't necessarily have the kind of size that has really crowded Indiana out, right? That is just sort of just completely walled off the rim and said there's just nothing you're going to be able to do to win this matchup today. I think it is potentially, I wouldn't guarantee this, I think it is potentially a game where Indiana can maybe have some of that success, getting inside, outside for its offense. But
they got a 7-footer.
They do, and Tilly is good. But, I mean, for a 7-footer, like, his rebound percentages aren't anything crazy. His block percentage isn't anything crazy. He draws a ton of fouls, but he also commits a lot of fouls. He commits 5.5 fouls per 40 minutes in conference play. Like, that's a large number. I mean, we've talked all year about, like, the foul issues that at times Indiana has had. Sam Alexis is only averaging 4.8 fouls per 40 minutes in Big Ten play. So, like, Tilly is even more foul prone than Alexis is. I don't know that it's a game where Indiana is just got no chance to sort of, I don't even want to say win inside, but just have enough success inside to shake some things loose. I'm a lot more concerned if I'm Indiana, and this is simplistic analysis, but I just, how do you manage Bruce Thornton? Especially next to, Devin Royal, John Mobley, et cetera. Like, Thornton is probably the most, in my opinion anyway, the most underrated player in the league. And it's because he's never played for an Ohio State team that really sort of gave him the platform to showcase just how good he's been. But he's been good his whole career. He's been unreal this season. I mean, he's shooting 64% on twos. He's turning the ball over on 9% of possessions, which is an incredibly stingy number. He's actually rebounding the ball fairly well for a point guard. Like, how Indiana manages Bruce Thornton in this game, I think, goes a long way toward determining whether or not they win the game.
Yeah, and he's had some big games. We had 32 against Michigan State, had a big game against Wisconsin. You assume, Enright maybe gets the assignment, and he's got to stay out of foul trouble, because when he's kind of gotten in foul trouble, things have gone off the rails quickly. I mean, I know he doesn't bring much offensively, but his defensive sort of energy does set the tone for the team. And I mean, there is the part, this being on the road, like Indiana, 3 wins total on the road this year.
Well, I'd say a couple things. Number one, I mean,
it's not a great environment. Sure.
No. I would go further than that. Indiana has 3 road wins, 4 away from home if you count the Marquette game. The other thing I would say, this is a curiosity I have about this game more generally, the same way that Ohio State in football historically, kind of makes Memorial Stadium pretty comfortable. Not obviously probably next season, but if we're talking about historically, for the same thing that makes the Ohio State game feel pretty comfortable for the Buckeyes when they come to Bloomington, I have seen that play out in reverse a fair amount at Value City Arena. There are a lot of IU fans, somewhere between Eastern Indiana, Western Ohio, Dayton, Columbus, Cincinnati, that will go to Value City, which frankly is not a good environment, period. It's not a building. I mean, at the peak of Thad Matta, that place was tough to play, but it has not been anything like that in a long time. And I'm not being overly critical. It wasn't a building that was built for college basketball atmosphere. It was a building that was built to be multi-purpose and host concerts and events and things like that, and then also college basketball. It is not an imposing environment, and what I'm curious about is just what the split of fans is, because I think Ohio State maybe has revived a little bit of interest here late in the season because it's managed to play its way into the right side of the bubble. On the other hand, I have seen bad Indiana teams draw well at Value City. And so I'm curious to know what the environment feels like in there, because it's fair. Yes, it's fair to say Indiana's not won a ton away from home, although 4 wins away from home when you've only played I think 11 games, maybe 12 games away from home for a bubble team. That's pretty standard. I would say it's not terrible. I'm just not sure how much of a road atmosphere this is going to be.
I mean, they've lost the 2 of the games they've lost on the road were Minnesota and USC, and those were not great atmospheres for the home team. So I mean,
no, I more just mean I think it has the opportunity to be a good atmosphere for the road team.
But I don't think it's the crowd necessarily that's the trick, right? Like I don't just the road. This team just hasn't played well. That USC game was not. I mean, and I know that was the second part of the West Coast trip, and Minnesota too. And maybe crowd helps, but the energy level, the sort of the folk, there are things beyond the crowd that dictate how a team plays well on the road. And this team just has not had it in games on the road where it would be easy just with a little more energy or a little more focus to escape with wins in both of those. And so and I know you weren't at either of those. So maybe, if you had seen that, you'd be a little less confident that just a few more Indiana fans would help them. So I don't know. It's just those. I mean,
games you could say the same thing about Rutgers and Maryland. When they pounded them. I mean, it's less about sort of the road atmosphere and more about it might feel a little bit like a home atmosphere. Is my point.
Right, but I'm saying the atmosphere is not what dictates whether they're playing well on the road or not. There are other aspects of that. They just don't have energy when they go on the road. They just don't feel I just. Not been consistent road team, and I don't necessarily know that that's just crowd based, but we'll see.
I mean, I think they've been a consistent road team for a bubble team, and I don't mean that as a compliment, but I think that's my point. Is I think they've delivered fairly consistently what you would expect a bubble team to deliver, which is a lot of relatively underwhelming road performances with a small handful of meaningful ones. I mean, that UCLA win, it does stand up. Right, it does. I mean, it is. Wait.
What's the handful of meaningful wins away from home? One win away from home that was slightly meaningful. UCLA.
Marquette keeps drifting between quad 2 and quad 3.
But also that was neutral site and in Chicago.
That's away from home. I mean, the committee.
I would not say that that's a meaningful.
The committee will see that as away from home. It won't see it as a road game, but it will see it as away from home.
Meaningful game.
I'm just telling you, the committee will see that as away from home.
Yes, it's away from home, but the meaningful.
Okay, did your words?
An 11-9, a meaningful win against an 11-19 team is not
a quad 2 win away from home.
No,
that's how the committee will see it.
But not meaningful.
If Marquette can get into the top 100, I don't know where they are in the net right now. They've been drifting back and forth. It's been flipping back and forth the last couple of weeks, I think. Marquette is currently 96th in the net. So that is a quad 2 neutral site win.
You're just trying to delay talking about Dayton, your favorite experience as a beat reporter.
Well, let's talk about their resume maybe more broadly, and then kind of bring in where that would land them. So, like I said, I wrote something kind of trying to draw on some of what I learned from the mock selection process earlier this year. The NCAA had several media folks up at their headquarters in Indianapolis. I don't know why I couldn't get that word out. And we ran through a lot of different things, and I think we've talked about this. Like at the time, Indiana felt not like a lock, but comfortably in the field. I think they were a 9 in where the committee kind of put them, because I think they had a seed like either the top 5 or the top 6 lines, and then they did everything else all the way down to the sort of last 4 in, and then we did that. What was true then is even more so now. There are some metrics that, like Indiana, frankly, there are fair to say some that don't. The resume-based metrics, which is like the net, KPIs in there, net and WAB are the two that you probably hear reference the most, and WAB has been wins above bubble, has been not like a nailed on predictor of the committee's thinking, but it's tracked pretty closely the last 3 years with the way the committee has wound up seeing the field. Those don't love Indiana, especially after the 4-game losing streak, and that wasn't just losing 4 games; it was also the way they lost those games. Just like the heaviness in some of those defeats. The predictive metrics, which have generally been a little bit higher on Indiana for most of the season, KenPom, Torvik, BPI, still kind of have Indiana more in a little bit more of a healthy place. The advantages for Indiana are the 2 wins that are quad 1 are, I think, probably going to stand up as quad 1A, or at least quad 1 all year. I forget what quad 1A is for road wins. Purdue is a 1A win. There aren't going to be a lot of teams on the bubble that have a win better than Purdue. Purdue, I think, is 9th right now in the net. What they're not going to like is, number 1, those resume-based metrics. Number 2, frankly, just the lack of quantity. If you talk about Indiana, 2 quad 1 wins, 5 quad 1+2 wins, compare that to like Texas, which is probably on the right side of the bubble right now. But Texas has 7 quad 1 wins and 8 wins in quads 1 and 2. I know Auburn is maybe in part because of some comments Bruce Pearl has made in the last few days, become a bit of a hot button discussion in this. And Auburn, I get it. They're only 16-14 in the SEC. And I think we can make an argument in good faith that maybe a team that's 2 wins over 500 probably shouldn't be in the tournament. But Auburn has 4 quad 1 wins, and it has 8 wins in quads 1 and 2. Now, Indiana does not have any losses in quads 3 or 4, which is much more of a consideration for that first game up in Chicago, and really needing to not lose that game. But my point is, what's going to matter when you wind up in the room, and I think we talk about this every year, but it was even more sort of like stark in its contrast when I sort of walked through it in person, is that you have to find points of comparison. If you have like wild outliers, like if you're comparing Indiana to Santa Clara, well, Indiana's got 2 quad 1 wins and Santa Clara's only got 1. But Indiana's played literally twice as many quad 1 games as Santa Clara. So is that the right way to compare them? Or do you try to lean on the metrics? When you start scrubbing these resumes together, and the scrubbing process is quite literally, you'll say, this is the number 1 team in our list. We're going to scrub them against number 2. We're going to put their resumes up next to one another, and we're going to essentially just sort of debate whether 2 should be ahead of 1. And if we say no, 1 stays at 1, we go 2, 3. When you're doing that with like the top 10, 12 teams, like there's compelling arguments for all of them, but it is not that difficult when you get down to the bubble and you've got teams where the metrics are wildly in one direction or the other, and where, this team's played all these quad 1 games, but this team's got, no quad 3 or 4 losses, whatever else. Like it's going to depend a little bit, and this is where it's kind of out of your hands on what the committee is ultimately able to use to separate these teams. And, that's the trick if you're Indiana, is it feels like you kind of take it out of your own hands. I don't know if that makes sense because I kind of rambled there. Forgive me. But
it was a lot.
It does just leave Indiana in a precarious position unless, as we discussed at the top, Indiana can add some real quality here in the not so distant future.
Yeah, but I mean that's just not. There's not enough time left in the season to do that at a meaningful sort of.
I mean, there is if you win Saturday and then you get a quad 1 win in Chicago. I mean, that's
that's 3 wins after. Like they're locked into the. They got to win 3 games that way, and it's just that's not.
It's tough. It's tough. No, I get it. It's tough, and that's why the difference. Not that no one's ever going to see one game as an elimination game. No one in the committee room is ever going to see one game as if you lose this, you're out, you're off the bubble. But that's why Saturday feels so substantial, is because it's a lot more reasonable, I think, to imagine Indiana winning Wednesday and Thursday and then losing Friday in Chicago than it is to imagine Indiana winning 3 or even 4 games in a row in Chicago, right? That is what makes Saturday so important to me.
But I think because I think the key point is the resume is a resume, and it's as good as their resume can get on all the metrics and all that. It's still a bubble team, and they're still going to be in the Dayton area regardless. And I think that's the point that I was trying to make with the Dayton discussion of it all. Look, you lay out their resume. It's still not getting them into the field straight. They still got to go through Dayton, whether if they win those 3 games, lose.
I don't think Dayton is guaranteed.
What?
But I think to get out of Dayton would need probably those 3 straight and then some help. Or if they really
so the most likely scenario, best case scenario, is Dayton for this team. Otherwise, it's an outlier, right? Otherwise, you're winning a bunch of games when you played yourself out and great job. But I just think if they're going to make it, the most likely destination is Dayton. Regardless,
I think that's true. I think what changes that calculus is what happens elsewhere, right? If some other bubble teams really kind of tank it, because a small handful always do. Conference tournament week, they no show in their first game, or they pick up a bad loss or whatever. That's I think where, if you're Indiana, to avoid Dayton, as you said, in a reasonable best case scenario, which would probably be win Saturday and then 2 in Chicago, it would not just be down to you. It would also be down to, what did Auburn do? What did Cincinnati do? What did San Diego State do? You would need some others to sort of fall away and slide in behind you. And then you'd also obviously, and there aren't going to be ton of bid thieves this year because a lot of these mid-major conferences aren't going to get more than maybe 2, in some cases, maybe a 3rd automatic bid. It's not a year where we're going to get 5 from the Mountain West and 4 from the A-10. That's just not the way the math stacks up this year. So I don't think there are going to be a ton of bid thieves. But yeah, what you need if you're Indiana is, win Saturday, probably win 2 in Chicago, and then look for some help, if in terms of getting out of Dayton. Now, I think if that happens, if they get to 21 wins, and that's not a magic number, I'm just saying that's how many games they would have won in this scenario. If they're at 21 wins, I think they're in. But I think to your point, the likelier landing spot in that situation, possibly much likelier, is Dayton, without the help of a few other teams falling away around them. Because I think you as we've talked about, you got a leg to stand on, but it's not the sturdiest one imaginable.
No, and I just it's not we've talked off camera just about where regardless of where the season finishes now, just missing out on the tournament, bubble team, or in as one of the last regular spots. It's not far off from what the predictions were before the season. I don't think that they, and some of the comments here are frustration over kind of DeVries or just the team's overall performance, but it's not off of what we thought they were capable of, or what, maybe I think, like I said, we maybe bought into sort of the start a little bit and thought maybe this team's ceiling is a little higher, and they kind of fell back to where, we thought they were in Puerto Rico or before that. And obviously I think, I don't think DeVries necessarily did a bad job of coaching this year. I think the job that he has now addressed is the talent evaluation and what he needs to succeed at the Big Ten and in this conference, and the sort of roster makeup. Like, putting all your eggs in one basket in the shooting basket was not the greatest idea, and it did not work. And maybe it was the specific players they got. Maybe the strategy can work with a better group. But obviously he hired a GM and one of an absolute sort of qualified, if you're bringing in a person to sort of help you shape a roster, you could not have gotten a better person than Ryan Carr, right? I mean, with his experience.
No, not in the sense of, stepping down from college or the NBA to college. And I think so much of it is just, and this is simplistic, but it's true. So much of it to me is just what lessons were learned. Okay, number one, how much of this was by design in terms of how this roster was built and maybe therefore some of the missteps in building it, and how much of it was by necessity of the roster turning over and just sort of saying, hey, like we can't close all these holes in 1 year. We've just got to sort of make a decision and cut our cloth a certain way. I don't know if DeVries will ever give like a complete answer to that, but I think at least behind closed doors, talking with the staff, talking with Ryan Carr, talking with Scott Dolson, I think that will probably be part of the discussion. And then the other piece of it is like what lessons are learned, to your point. Like, did you really think you could get away with such a thin front court and an undersized front court? Was that a choice? Or again, was that maybe, hey, we have this amount of money, we have this amount of time, and it's not like all these transfers are going to wait for us to make up our mind. So we've got to move quickly. And this is just a choice we have to make. I think it so much of the success of this project, this process, whatever term you want to use from here, and I think this is what you were kind of saying there, really revolves around just how well DeVries and Ryan Carr work together. And whether that, whether bringing someone who is going to be doing for a college program what it was doing at a pretty high executive level for an NBA team.
And recently took that NBA team to the finals.
Yes,
that helped.
And
not a low level, like not middling or.
Let's be fair about that roster, and I can't sit here and tell you, where Ryan Carr's fingerprints were on that roster, but like, it wasn't a roster that just sort of built itself, right? Like,
it wasn't a LeBron James at his peak, surrounded by
and we just went and got 2 stars that wanted to play with him and whatever else. Like, that was a well-constructed team.
Yes.
There were a lot of good evaluation decisions made in the process of your Aaron Naismiths and your Nimhards and so forth. Like, what does that look like? How quickly does it work, and how well does it work? And again, some of this stuff in time, Darren DeVries will probably pull the curtain back on. He's not going to do it right now, if for no other reason than because what is the value in going out and being like, yeah, I knew this team was terrible. Like, I just figured we had to ride it out. Like, he's going to stand behind his players. You would not want anyone in that job who wasn't going to do that. But it is going to long term be about lessons learned and how those lessons are applied, how sort of that learning is applied essentially.
But again, this wasn't off, like, even if they don't make the tournament, it wasn't far off what we thought the season was going to be, right?
No.
It's within 3 wins of being an in or sort of where they end up. Like, they end up at 19 wins. So they lose against Ohio State, win 1 in the Big Ten tournament. 2 wins, they're probably at least in the bubble, and like that, it's just not a big difference. And so, like, maybe stylistically and like maybe some of the games in the Big Ten just didn't look like like I said, I think the biggest problem for DeVries is maybe Marquette was worse than they thought. So like those games looked more impressive, and like the shooting, man, this team can shoot. And then it was like, not that good. And so maybe that was probably the biggest challenge they faced. They did raise the ceiling a little bit sort of early, and then fell back down to earth in a way that, in the Big Ten, it did get a little bit ugly because their deficiencies were sort of certainly more exposed. And then the shooting just never got to the point again where it was like that.
Where it was able to overcome what they like the obvious holes in the roster. Yeah.
Right. And so, but again, like the final result will be very within the mean or whatever of what we thought they were going to be. And so I know fans will be frustrated because, like, to your point, like, and this is not DeVries's fault. It's like the groundhog nature of the IU men's basketball right now, right? This is where they've been, and people want more. And so, and you've had different faces, and they've sort of promised more, and then it's not worked. And so, like, I get it. But I just think, time is not something all these coaches get, and patience isn't what you get. But I mean, it's one of Ryan Carr's early points is it's going to take time to sort of meaningfully change the construction of the roster to make it so you don't have to replenish your roster with all transfers and run the risk of these things happening, because if one or two evaluations are off or injuries when you're changing a roster with 6 to 7 transfer guys, it's very hard. And they don't want to be sort of in that space, but you need more than one season. And I think maybe that's the biggest challenge. And we've talked about this as well, that, like, I don't know how much, I mean, the 3 freshmen will help that they're bringing in, but like they didn't, and we knew there wasn't going to be a ton, but they didn't establish many building blocks to go forward. Like I've said, no offense to Nick Dorn, and Trent Sisley, I think, should get another chance and should be, I think that there's talent there, but like there's no guy that I would sort of say I'm attached to going forward, other than just from a sheer numbers standpoint, not to have to recruit as much. But like, I think you'd be open to replacing much of it. Like, if you could get guys that you feel like would be better or have a higher upside, like, and that's sort of like where, again, the year's a waste a little bit in that sense, where you don't get to bring over much in the way of talent. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll bring a couple more guys than that, but like, I think I don't see a ton of got carryover where you're very confident, like, man, we've got 2 pieces that will be a 6-man and a starter, or like 2 starter. You just didn't establish that this year. You don't have.
I think what you probably want more than anything is more institutional knowledge than you could lean on this year. Like, you basically had 2 guys that at least knew the coach and the system, and like had an instinctive understanding of, okay, I'm not just like a robot that when a certain play is called, the ball goes here and I go here, but like an understanding of, how to operate in here is what the coach called. Here is also conceptually what's supposed to happen. So if I see this, then maybe I know instinctively I drift over here instead of cutting there, or whatever, vice versa. That's the one thing. That's the one argument I think for maybe keeping a little bit more of this roster together than not the one argument, but I think that is a primary argument. It's just, even if you are going to go out and get a bunch of guys that you expect to be high impact, high minutes guys in the portal, again in the spring, having a little bit more in the way of institutional knowledge and people that can sort of tell those guys, like, this is how you do this. This is why we do it this way. Because if you don't do that, then, frankly, you're going to have even less of it next year without Tucker DeVries and Connor Enright. So, I mean, it gets even more complicated at that point. I wanted to close on one thing, because I think we've both written about this a little bit, and I mean, it's not our job to be positive, but I feel like this has been a pretty clear-eyed analysis of maybe some of the things that have not gone so well for Indiana. I do think it is worth noting Lamar Wilkerson's season. We've both written about this at different times, and kind of whatever happens here, he is realistically having one of the great scoring seasons in at least a generation at Indiana. He's averaging 21.1 points per game. He is 6 made 3-pointers away from tying Steve Alford for the program record in a single season. 107 makes the record. He has 101. Before anybody sort of shouts that, like, it's a different game, whatever, yes, it is. But Alford did get 34 games to hit that number. Wilkerson's only played 30. So, like, he's gonna. It's not one of those where he's gonna come close to or maybe even break the record because he gets to play so much more basketball. He would be the first Hoosier since Trace Jackson Davis to average 20 points a game in a season. He'd be the first guard to do it since Eric Gordon. I know you haven't been around as long as I have, And so I'm actually kind of more curious for your thoughts, because I know, you've borne witness to some debates I've gotten into with other people around the program of where does this compare to your Yogi Ferrells, to your Victor Oladipos, and so forth. It's just one season, and he's probably not going to accomplish what some of those players accomplished from a career perspective or a team-wide perspective, and I do think that counts. But I also think it is fair to point out that Lamar Wilkerson is having one of the, most impressive individual seasons, certainly from a guard offensively, that this program has seen in quite a long time.
Yeah, I just think it's going to get completely lost, to be honest. Like, I don't think it's resonated. I think he's a nice kid, and I think people like kind of his story, but like, compare. I mean, it's obviously we've talked a lot about Fernando and football and the transfers and sort of how JMU kids came in and made an impact. Like, I think part of the struggle with the men's basketball part of it, and it's kind of tied to it, is that it used to be that the guys stayed and you got some equity, and fans have struggled sort of embracing the transfer nature of the basketball program, and the lack of success of the team, I think, will certainly hurt his sort of where he's thought of. Or, I mean, as impressive as the achievements you listed, if they don't win 20 games, what does it all mean? Like, and somebody said, he's a good stats guy and a bad
What
team.
do you think would get it remembered? Like making the tournament, winning a game in the tournament, getting the second weekend of the tournament? It
would something take Herculean like that, and he's at the center of it. Like, I just don't.
He has the game that knocks out
Michigan State gets you to the final, or whatever, like an upset like that. Because like right now, like who with the 40-point games against Penn State, and who was the other one?
Penn State and what was the other 40-point game? Oregon.
I mean, two of the worst. I mean, Penn State's the worst Big Ten team I've seen play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less bothered by that.
But I'm not trying to discount.
Like Chase Jackson Davis' 40-point game was against
Marshall. My point is like that will be like a 40-point performance against the worst team in the conference is not something that's going to be remembered the day after. And so, like, my point is yes, he will have achievements and his name will be in the record book, and I think it's something to take pride in, and you can't take that away from him. I'm just saying, from a fan perspective, like when you talk about those guys you listed, nobody will remember. And again, I'm not trying to be mean about Lamar or take away from his achievements. I just think it's very hard in this era, in the transfer era, without success. It's just transactional, and you're here and gone, and then I think that's it. And so unless you do something where it's, Fernando built that with those game-winning moments, and that's how, and obviously a title, but like even if he didn't win the national title or the Heisman, and he had some of those game-winning drives, like you would have remembered him just because of those moments. Whereas like Lamar Wilkerson never had kind of that moment, right? He scored a lot, but like I don't know what that gets you. Somebody has to score these points when you're playing 5 players.
Mike Niziolek hates Lamar Wilkerson. You heard it here. You heard it here first. Mind your banners exclusive.
Do you disagree?
Like, no, I don't a ton. I just think like it is worth pointing out because, quietly Indiana's just not had a lot of players like this recently. Like you just, Trace Jackson Davis was the first one in a long time that felt that individually dominant.
Like, I think a good comparison, like Shea Chesky, what she did is very similar, actually, for the women's team. Yeah. Like her, and like incredible.
But she has at least, obviously, she was part of some other teams that had a little bit more team-wide success.
But but not in terms of Nina. Like, but she didn't even get recognized by the coaches in the conference.
That was wild.
Right, like, she made second team Big Ten. So like, it's like, like it's not just me. Like, I mean, like you went.
That was absurd. Like that was,
absolutely.
But yes.
But like I'm saying, like team success, obviously. Not just from a fan perspective, like from like all the way down, like it does sort of impact how you're viewed widely because like, well, if you're scoring, what is it doing? And so like, I think there's actually a pretty good comparison between the two, like that it's just not the same when you're not responsible like directly for like a game winning plays at the end. It's hard to sort of stand out by just scoring because like I think coaches see it too, like, well, somebody's gonna need to score points on teams. And it's not, like I said, I know you're making it me against Lamar. He'll get those records. If he has that record, that's an impressive record to have. His name will be in the record book. Yeah. I just don't think that from the fans' perspective that it will be one that's like celebrate, like, man, remember that season that he had. Like, I'd be like, you're making fun of me, but you disagree? Like, I don't know. Like,
No, I respect the game, unlike some people on this podcast. So he's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. We will obviously be in Columbus tomorrow. Maybe do a live podcast. There's that little like random like exclusive club right next to the media room that sometimes we sneak into. I doubt we'll do a live show after that, but maybe if Indiana wins, it might be worth just kind of checking in and taking temperature.
Live show from Portland in a couple of weeks.
Minsk. I think the Minsk regional. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners for March 6, 2026. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back next week, probably from somewhere in Chicago. But for now or until then, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Talk to you soon.